All right, so this week was about parenting, and I chose option B, about the from the teacher and administrator perspective. And I know I've talked before, and I've said it so many times. Just that my lack of experience, I think, is hinders me a little bit, but it also lets me learn brand new too, and things that might work here. As I've come into this position this year, where I didn't have the opportunities because of the type of year we're in, to pull kids out of their pods. We had to keep them in their pods. It's actually been nice for me to be able to explore and discover and reflect on, as a teacher, on what we need to have, what we do and don't have in our gifted program. So, as a student in this school district myself, because I went to school here, my kids went to school here, but also as a first grade teacher within this district, I know that we do solely rely on that score. And it's for different reasons, but mainly I'm sure it's always been limited staff, limited staff and resources. So, like we've said before, you and I've talked about, if you start opening up all these scales and you start recognizing different domains of giftedness, then you got to be able to accommodate those. So I know we are back on the right track to wanting to do something more. I've said it before, our accreditation happened, and then all of our eggs had to go in that basket of taking care of those lower scoring kids and kind of neglecting, for lack of any other word, the kids who could do it. So as parents, I'm sure there has been some frustration, but again, it's one of these things, like a lot of these parents, if even kids, if they don't know any different, they don't know to expect any different.
Mhm.
So they haven't been big complainers or critics about what we have and haven't had. So that's a good thing. And we have tried to explain to them that from K through 2, we have those preliminary recommendations from teachers, where the gifted coordinator has been coming to the elementary school and just pulling out 1 hour a week. And it's usually been a focus on like a language, but you recognize those kids as possibilities. And they normally do coincide pretty well with the nationally norm test that those our kids take in second grade. Now, it's been interesting to me because I've been told that that's what they go by now for those higher scoring nationally normed tests. As for the kids that will be fully identified or tested and be possibly identified for gifted, I did not go back and find it, but I know we've talked about it in the text, and I know it was in one of the videos, where that's not necessarily a good thing. And I found that very interesting, because I don't know that the powers above me will agree with that. But I think it would be, that only sounds right and almost common sense, to compare them with kids just here, even just of their own type of student population. So it'll be interesting when to finally sit down and talk about the different changes to make. But and they're also, when we start doing more, identifying more ways, we have to provide services for those kids, and I'm just not sure when that can happen. So of course that leads us back to making sure that our classroom teachers are educated, which ends up coming back to us to make sure we have professional development and that they know what to say to parents when those questions are asked. Right now, I wouldn't have known as a first grade teacher for all those years, other than, well, and maybe it was a little less on my shoulders because I was K through 2 and things weren't being officially not identified. But I did have them ask, can my kid not? So and so said that their child is going with that gifted group to the language. Can my kid not go? And really, those were just chosen from the high reading group. She came during literacy time, and they were 5 from the K1 and 2 highest literacy groups. They did match up pretty well with those top scores of the MAPS testing. But so that's where we were right now. I think most of our teachers could explain that to parents, but still, there needs to be something that would clearly explain to teachers as well as parents our definition, how they're identified, what's provided, and then how that service is provided. So I'm like, that would be a goal for me, to not only have it for parents, but also have it for my teachers. So it's a clear, concise way of explaining it. The experience that I had working with gifted parents, students, and parents so far did kind of go along with the text because they can be considered a little bit more of a challenge, which that's okay. They a lot of times those gifted parents are the ones who are advocating for their child and wants to see more. There was one thing that I said I do not agree. Where to go? And it was one statement that was made like, oh, it was almost saying that only, I quoted it from page 453. Parents of young gifted children appear to engage in somewhat different and more child-focused parenting behaviors compared to parents of non-identified children. And those behaviors influence the child's academic social growth during early childhood and beyond. Uh, that's not, you don't have to be considered gifted for parents to be child oriented, child focused, centered. So, and it didn't, but that's what it said. I quoted it, compared to parents of non identified children. Now I realize that that's a high, medium, and low kind of scale. We can't just say, oh, there's parents who aren't, and the kids aren't in the gifted program. Their parents really aren't doing anything for them. So that's why I typed not true when I was typing that into my notes. Um, let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to read my notes. Um, I have had parents ask about being considered into it. There's so many domains that we have to consider. Is why I'm realizing that this score can't be used. Even when we go back to Jess Renzulli's 3-ring concept, that's a fairly simple model for us to look at, being such a small school division, and starting to build this back up, because it takes into these few accounts, but it also reminds us that not all kids are going to be gifted the same way. The same, one child can be gifted this year and not the next. That it's not that it is it's changing. So let's see, it may not always present itself in the same person the same way at the same time. A child's commitment to task is just huge. I think they called it grit in one of our videos, maybe, and that made me think about even my own daughter. She was never tested for gifted. She's always A, couple B's, but the grit she's played basketball since she was 10, and that meant we got on a travel team with 8 other girls who ended up being on the high school team. They won 3 state championships in a row. They did basketball from the time they were 10. And this coach here, 3-hour practices every evening. And still, all but 2 of those 8 got academic letter jackets for carrying a 3.7 or higher in their high school career. So that to me is as much grit as someone that can come and build a Lego thing. So the comparisons, we have to recognize, I do want to do more to recognize those skills and not just a score. So hopefully that as we move forward, I want to stress the importance of our teachers understanding many facets of gifted and what they can recognize, what it is and what it isn't, and but also so they are able to answer the questions and cite those type of websites like we were talking about earlier. On page 444, they listed several of them. And exploring them, I've gone to the NAGC website several times as I'm looking things up. It's easy to read. I went to that Hoagie's gifted education page. It was all over the place. Like, it was so much on there. It kind of took your, if you have a hard time focusing, it's all there. It's very comprehensive, but it was not, it was a lot of stuff scattered in different places on the site. So my goal, and I really hope that I'll be able to do this, and I think I can do it with the last project that we work on, is to design a pamphlet for parents and teachers. On 344, it says that parents often feel like their child's academic needs are an afterthought rather than a priority when they may need higher level challenges, which of course that has happened here in our district, our local district, but hopefully we're moving away from that. My experience with this, with parents through all this, we've had the occasional parents who will email and say, so and so's bored in class. Is there anything more challenging they can do? And this one particular child that I'm thinking of, I think he's very smart, but I don't know that he thinks outside the box either.
Mhm.
I think, but he's probably very smart, and I don't think he's been identified. So I look forward to being able to pull those kids and do that.
Mhm.
Um, those parents, though, are the ones, like our text said, that will fill the parking lots for events and field trips and meetings, become PTA members or volunteer in the classroom. And all of this shows their child that school is important to them. This may be a silly example, and I don't know if you have experienced the same thing. And I do think it's different as you go higher, but being in first grade for so long, it was interesting to see a transition in gifts. Christmas gifts, Valentine's Day gifts, teacher appreciation gifts. And even my friends that started doing this before me, your desk would be filled with, and it might just be a baked good, a couple cookies, it may be a card, it might be a candle, a little stuffed teddy bear, but something that showed that showed the parent took the child to pick this out, and it showed Miss Coleman or Miss Highland. They are important to us.
Mhm.
We they are important to us. We want to make them feel special. The last couple years in first grade, there might have been five.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know if that would be interesting to see if that is all over the, a more of a generalized, universal thing that's happening, or just here, because
Yeah.
we certainly as a community have had our economic issues, and places closed and people not have jobs. But I just think that that is a reflection of what they think of you, and their importance, that they're telling you, their child, that you are in their lives, to respect your authority, to do what you've asked them to do. So I just, that's always kind of stood out to me. Um, and the other teachers as well. I can we go back to the going back to the parents and their problems that they can mention on 453. Talked about the lack of confidence that parents do have in schools, a lack of challenge, which I just mentioned. We have one that just recently asked about that. Their distress over the possibility of being bullying or labeled, and a lack of communication about what's actually going on. It would be, we don't do it. I was going to ask you if you had any type of newsletter that goes home to gifted parents. So I wrote that down as a possibility of just saying, we worked on this week, just to kind of keep them informed. Here's a list of some new possible websites you can do. So I thought about doing that as well. Um, and I know that the parents get frustrated. We've had two this year. This goes into the last chapter that I read about homeschooling. We've had two this year that have pulled their kids for homeschooling. One child I had in first grade, there's no doubt in my mind, she did not even need to be here in seventh grade. She could do anything we handed her. Um, and just amazing. Not only that, I don't know if you can see it very well.
Oh, wow.
This is something that she left in her space, and I couldn't throw it away. And
That's amazing.
she is amazing with her drawings. And I would love to have that ability to connect her with, like, Southern Virginia and the art department there, because I don't have anybody here that can do. I'm sure our art teachers can't do that well. So those, I understand why they would move, but I'm glad I got to read this chapter, because I was very surprised. It made me ask some questions. The numbers are crazy. In 2012, there were 1.77 million students being homeschooled, and 10 to 15,000 in 1970s.
Mm-hmm.
So in just this, what, 40 years, I guess that's 40
Mhm.
years ish, they there's been that big of a leap. So when I couldn't find really anything about what was required for homeschooling, I called somebody here in our local district. I was like, okay, I can't really find it. What's required? Pretty much nothing.
You have to have a high school degree. I don't think you can homeschool your child unless you have a high school degree. But if you have a high school degree, then it's fine.
That's what she said. And I was hoping there was more, or at least that you had to show assessment. Apparently, you have to have a high school degree, and you have to tell them, I'm using this curriculum, but never prove it.
Nope.
So the one child I'm just now talking about, she's fine. I know she's going to be fine no matter what she does. But the second one, I would not say that about him. So if somebody's not coming along behind them,
Parents
I'm
do it a
not,
lot of times when they run into truancy issues. They go, fine, I'm gonna homeschool. And it's like, no, you're not. And then we see it a lot, or if their kid gets in trouble, we're gonna homeschool. And then they bring them back a year later. They've done nothing for an entire year and they wonder why their kid isn't successful.
right, exactly. I
Because you
really
can
was
do it right.
surprised.
Two of my good family friends growing up, they homeschooled, but I mean, they did it right. They had clear curriculum, they had clear community mentors, they had homeschooling groups, like they did
Yeah.
yearly assessments. Like the four girls, they all went, one went to Wesleyan and three others went to William and Mary. The guys are all like incredible. They all have day jobs, like well, high up day jobs, but they're incredible artisans that have been recognized like all over the state. They ship all over the country and into Canada because they were all gifted in their own way. And this one family, they're all artisans and that was their gift. And they got in with doing basically like mentorships. One of them does, they do woodworking, they do leather making, they do metal, and like, but that was their priority. Like they had a top standard and they met it. Most of our parents don't hold that standard for homeschooling. And I wondered that when you were talking, it was one of the notes I jotted down. Since you guys do have such issues in your school system with like financing and understaffing and things like that, do you feel like, because they talked a lot in the homeschooling chapter that there isn't a lot of like concise research, that it's hard to get good research on it, but do you feel like a lot of your parents turn to homeschooling because of the way your school system is staffed and funded?
I don't, but I think it's because they are not parents in this community. They're not parents that can stay at home and really do anything with their kids.
Yeah,
They have to send them here.
yeah,
These two, I was just disappointed that there was not, you didn't have to prove anything. You didn't have to send in at the end of the 9 weeks testing results or, yeah, I really was. And that, I guess I had always questioned that, but I didn't go look until I read this chapter.
yeah.
Um,
I
yeah,
also was curious with HLA, you mentioned it a little bit. So what we have found is that, so we went through like November 16th, completely virtual. And then kids had the choice to come back 2 days a week. And we are getting ready to come back 4 days a week next month, but they locked them in at this semester. Whatever you chose at this semester is what you stay for the whole semester, mainly because of scheduling issues and
right.
that thing. But we talked about when we were talking about bringing kids back, a lot of our gifted kids almost thrived in HLA because they can self-motivate, they can learn quickly. They don't need us to sit here and watch them read for 30 minutes in class.
Yeah.
They're going to do that on their own. So in some ways, we have found that HLA has actually been beneficial for our high kids because they zoom in 2 days a week. They self-pace on the rest of the day. They can explore the rest of the day. And so in some ways, we have found that beneficial because even though it's not formal acceleration, it still in some ways is allowed for that differentiation. And I was curious with your school system, if you have felt the same way. I think you kind of alluded to it. HLA is not homeschooling, but it's a hybrid version of it. Have you
Right.
found that your gifted kids have thrived with that?
We've been back 4 days a week since August 31st.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Yeah. We're just that small that we were able to do it with
Yeah.
the number that was choosing to be virtual and the number that was choosing to come back and still keep them 6 feet apart.
Oh,
So yeah, so we have been here 4 days a week. Elementary K-5 is 4 days a week. The high school is 2 and 2.
gotcha. Okay.
So,
Yeah.
but the middle school, we have been 4. So, and I'll be honest, there are kids who are virtual who are, I think they could go to college and handle that time management, organization, and get the work done. And they're not labeled, excuse me, they're not labeled gifted. They are just that good and studious,
Right.
really. The few that I have actually identified as gifted are here, and they are, they're doing well, but they're here 4 days a week. But again, I think it's a lot of the fact that the parents aren't able to be at home to do something with them and
Mhm.
really and make sure that they're staying on task and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So no, they haven't chosen, other than this one girl, they haven't chosen to go that route for any reason yet, but who knows? I mean, I realize that things could change. I
Yeah.
wish we had kind of locked our people in a little bit better because there is no lock into one thing or another.
So that's
which
one thing.
is-
So I really love my county. The county beside me that I actually live in, there's a reason I live there and work here. They have let their kids basically fluidly pick. So in the same class, you can have HLA kids, you can have 1 day a week kids, you can have kids that come 3 days a week, and it's been a nightmare. I had two more comments for yours. I loved how you were talking about the importance to look at Renzulli, all three of the categories, because again, I feel like so often parents think my kid's smart, my kid should be gifted, or my kid is gifted because they did well in tests. But they forget that creativity and task commitment. And in my STEM 7 class, I met with her mom today during parent conferences. And I really told her, like, I don't think you realize your child is exceptional when it comes to creativity and task commitment. It's a very quiet, shy child. She said at home, she's the same way. Like, she doesn't, whenever she does these really creative projects, she won't let any of them see them. But we're talking like multiple personalities, intense video editing, detailed scripts, like
Wow.
unbelievable. Like, I don't even know how to explain this shy child who really doesn't, I mean, she's high, but she's not like, there's nothing that makes her stand out in a classroom per se, other than she's quiet and she's focused, like she doesn't blow you through the roof with any of her test scores or anything like that. Her creativity and task commitment is unbelievable. And to hear her mom also say, we see that in her project, but she even hides that from us while she makes it. It
Wow.
was just the perfect example of seeing a kid as a whole and making sure, like, I tried to tell that mom, like, this is your child's gift. Like, this is what we look for. And then when you were talking too, you were talking about parental involvement in gifted students and things. And it makes me curious because they've talked about this, about giftedness can appear at any time, and it has to do with our background and our exposures. And it makes me wonder which came first, the child being gifted and the parent being involved, or the parent being involved, which resulted in the kid being gifted. Because if they're coming to the after school activities, they're doing the enrichment, they're doing the things we send home with them, is it that parent that truly allows that giftedness to appear earlier? It's kind of like, which one came first, the chicken or the egg,
Right, because Allison certainly she played all the time. She was on the basketball team, but if we weren't willing to travel every weekend, if I wasn't willing to pay a personal trainer $25 an hour to do other than the 3 hours, and the most of the parents did this for these girls. But if we weren't willing to do that, she would never have had that
right,
that commitment to something like this, whether it's regardless of what it is, a sport or a club or something you're just really passionate about, to have that work ethic and commitment to something. But you're right, if you don't have the parents that do it, it goes back to on 450, it discusses the difference in potential and achievement. And so it really does. And it talks about this, it made reference to a tiger mom. And it said that it was perspective saying that hard work and parenting are prioritized as the sources of academic success. And it says that if a child fails, it is due to a parent failure to push the child to greatness. I don't know that we have to push our kids. I had a first grader who cried if she got a 98 on a little spelling test.
Yeah, and at first grade, you're always like, honey, you're gonna be in trouble by the time you're older.
I mean, falling apart, or if she would lose the navy blue bow that went with the outfit. I mean, we're talking like falling apart because mom was going to be so mad. And I mean, I found myself in first grade saying, all right, well, just verbally, how do you spell it? Tell me now, how do you spell it? Just because she was literally terrified to go home to this mom, and she's a teacher here, and terrified to go home to this mom with any failure, anything that wasn't.
I'm curious if the mom really did react away, or if it was just a self-imposed expectation by the child. Because my mom has talked about that like a lot of times it was just self-imposed sense of obligation rather than truly she put any pressure on me or she responded anyway.
I've wondered that. I've tried to get to the bottom of it, but it sure was a genuine fear.
Yeah.
For this child to have to tell the mom.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, and I didn't want to ask the mom. Do you really do this to her?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go ahead and did you have anything else for yours?
No, you go.
Okay, so you talked about a newsletter, and so that's been something we talked about amongst the 4 secondary gifted teachers in my county. We all do such different things, and we've really transitioned away. I don't have a set pullout group. I don't have a set class. I go into classes, and I go into classes per teacher request. So it's hard for me to email and be like, this is what I did, because it's constantly changing. It depends on the teachers. So I don't send a newsletter home. I email a lot of resources, but I don't necessarily give an update of like, this is what we did this week, because I have 120 kids at my middle school identified as gifted, and close to 250 6 through 12. So what I offer them is very varied, and it's very much like which teacher you in. I have my STEM 7 kids see me every single day because I co-teach with that teacher. The gifted kids on the other team, their teacher hasn't invited me in, so I don't really see them. But one thing, so I chose to do option D, which I thought was really interesting because I started reading before I chose what I was going to do. And when we got to page 444, we'll got to it, it was pretty early on. I loved the resources they did because for my other class, we had to do a resource analysis and my partner and I are looking at underachievement. And so we've read and the NAGC has done a couple of their like position statements we've read, but that was one of the ones we looked at for our underachievement resource analysis. So I was like, well, I'm going to look at some of these others. And I was especially intrigued by the Davidson Institute, because since I have so many kids on my caseload and so much research supports, like it is kind of on the parents to provide enrichment elsewhere. I really liked the idea that they talked about like the state by state breakdown. So I'm going to screen share. So I had kind of already started diving into looking at some of the sites, and then it worked perfect for the discussion. So for the Davidson one, it was a little hard to find at first. So I had to use the exact search code in the book, which I hadn't typed in yet, because they put in, you have to do search database, which I thought was weird. I was like, shouldn't I have like a tab I can click on to do this?
Right.
So I didn't really like that aspect. But so I got really excited about this, except what I found in looking at this is, yes, it looks like a long list, but they're not broken down by state. And so I kind of found that discouraging because I felt like I work in a rural area. And so the idea of sending our kids to Colorado for something financially is probably not realistic. I don't know if they would put them on a plane. So I did a quick search for some Virginia ones, and I found some good ones. So there's like a nature camp one here in Virginia. There's the William and Mary one, but that one's all been canceled for this year because I have a specific student that I've talked to the principals, like she's a great kid. She's a quiet kid. She hasn't complained, but like you have one conversation with her, you realize we are not at all reaching her needs. So I was like, okay, can I get her? She really wants to do aerospace, do like astrophysicist type stuff. So I was looking to see if I could offer these, but like this one's not offered this year because of COVID. And there's the UVA ones, which those didn't look too bad. I can't remember if those are still being offered though, but there was only 3 for our entire state. There was none for West Virginia. I didn't see any for Maryland. So it's like, it sounds great, but it really wasn't that useful. So at first I was like, I'm going to send this to my parents. They're going to be able to find enrichment. It'll be great. I didn't feel like it did what I hoped it would do. So I decided this wouldn't be one I would share with parents. This one, the SENG, which looks more at the social emotional, from everything I found exploring it, it's all paid. So it's like, again, I work in a rural environment. We have parents who don't have much money, who don't have a lot of experiences. They want to help their kid, but they need to be able to do it an easy way. Sending them to Colorado with the Davidson Institute, not really an option.
No.
Paying for this site, like it says 8 to 10 week structured parent guides. Our parents don't have the money to do that, and they don't have the time to do that.
No.
And so that was a little discouraging that, again, both of these I didn't find that great. Maybe I just didn't catch everything, but I didn't feel like either of them. I was surprised they were mentioned in the text because I was like, oh, they made it in the text. They're going to be great. I didn't feel that way so much. The NAGC is great. Their position statements are really like concise to the point. I feel like the majority of my parents could access those. I felt like it was easy to navigate. I didn't pull Hoagie's up here because the discussion said 2 and I already had 3 up, but I agreed. The Hoagie's was like, it was so overwhelming. I pulled it up. It didn't feel professional. Because of its lack of professionalism, I didn't feel like it seemed reliable.
Right.
But the NAGC comes up a lot easier. It's really easy to navigate. I felt like it's got very easy to define navigation buttons. I love that it even had one in Spanish, because that's something else I recently met. So our EL population is drastically underrepresented. And I recently met with our coordinator for the county, and she was saying too, so often we forget to put things in Spanish for our parents. And at this point, my caseload really doesn't have any Spanish speaking parents on it, but I thought it was helpful that this, I mean, it looks like it's only one really, but at least had it in Spanish. And I also like the idea of an online resource because hopefully then they have a translator they could use. But I thought it was broken down really clear. I felt like parents could pretty easily understand what they might want to click on. Like just a simple tip sheet. So I felt like this was one I would definitely direct my parents to. And this is one resource, the Gifted Bill of Rights, that I really want to try to like advocate with my parents and my students. And again, this one is presented in Spanish and English, which is helpful. So the NAGC I thought was great in providing a resource to our parents. One thing I would like to do long-term, because again, I don't really have parents reach out to me asking for resources. We occasionally will have the whole they're not challenged thing, but by 7th and 8th grade, our schools really made an effort to try to offer some more accelerated style homogeneous groups. They immediately start differentiating in math by 7th grade. We started offering STEM classes in 7th and 8th grade based off application. We're looking at starting to homogeneously group in 6th grade for more of like a STEM project-based area, which I hate that it's only STEM. So I've talked to my administrator about letting the kids pick, do they want to go STEM or do they want to do more like history direction PBL class? So that's really what it comes down to, is more of an accelerated course of more inquiry PBL based rather than so much of the drill. But I thought about trying to create a hyperdoc for my parents, and I could just share with them at the beginning of the year of like, hey, are you curious about here? Here's NAGC. Hey, are you thinking about this? Here's this. And it could be pretty simple, pretty concise. I love Canva, so I could do it on Canva. It would be visually appealing, and just do a few links. Because again, since I service my children in such a variety of ways, I can't do something but so concrete. But at least getting them like the Gifted Bill of Rights, sending them to the NAGC, finding a couple. I found a site called Frontier that, again, most of my parents aren't overly high education levels. So reading a true scientific article is a little above a lot of them. But Frontiers is great. It's a free peer-reviewed website where they can search anything, but there are ways they can search specifically for giftedness if they were curious. So yeah, that was one thought I had, is that something like NAGC parents might not know about, and trying to find a simple hyperdoc that would just send them a few places if they were curious.
I like that idea, and that would probably work for me just as well as a monthly or newsletter, but at least something from the beginning of the year, at the end of the year as well, maybe of what we have covered and what we've done. So I like that idea as well. I'm writing all that down. And I had not seen that Gifted Bill of Rights. That would be something I'd love to include in that pamphlet.
Yeah, so I did at the beginning of the semester, me and the other the 4 secondary teachers, we each took one day a week that we sent out to all secondary gifted kids in the county, and we did like seminars. So like one of them did just we did Trading Tuesday, where we did the stock market game. Another one did Travel Thursday, which was more just like culture exposure, geography type stuff. But I did Mindful Monday, and a lot of it was I found on Teachers Pay Teachers like a great little unit, which now aspects of it I feel like aren't totally based in research. Some of it I felt like was a little skewed to like just things that we've assumed for a long time. One of the things they put in there was the Bill of Rights, and students like made their own Bill of Rights, and we talked about it and things. The one I didn't love was she did left and right brained learning, and that's not as supported by research, I have learned. I mean, it was still fun for the kids, but yeah, and then my other class, we looked at the Gifted Bill of Rights, and I really liked it. I felt like that was something, because I felt like, at least when I presented to the kids, I really focused on they have a right to understand how they learn and advocate for how they learn. Because a kid, like, if a kid's quiet and behaves, you don't realize that they're bored out of their mind. And so it's like, you don't need to whine, but like, we got to find a balance here.
Yes, you are exactly right. I like that a lot. I sure do. And they need to know that. I know this will never happen, but I would love, and we had our big faculty meeting the other day with our superintendent, like the once a year budget, what next year is going to look like, that kind of thing. And he said that it looked like, he wouldn't say one way or the other, but it looked like it was going to be that push to go back to the whole 5 days.
Us too, because this is what our person told us. There's waivers on time this year in classroom. So that's why they could give us the Wednesday teacher workday, because the state allowed waivers. But the state's not allowing an adjustment in time in classroom next year. So they can't keep us those days. And I'm like, those are my busiest days. That's when I do all my co-planning. That's when I do all of my cross-curricular planning. I have a challenge meeting every week. Like I offer my news. I run our school news, which is primarily gifted kids. We do that on Wednesdays. Like, I'm gonna die without Wednesdays.
It would be so nice though to have them come. You can require them to come, but do something like that. Let there be enrichment. For the gifted kids to run a newspaper or to do some kind of project. But I also have it so there's remediation as well. It would just be nice if that day could look different. But
Yeah, so we're looking at doing that. They're looking at proposing that 3 days a week is normal schedule. And then 2 days a week is you split up the classes the kids go to so that they're longer class periods. So that's when we can do more of our project-based learning, our skills labs, our science labs and stuff. And last year we did a cool thing. We called it Curiosity Hour. And so each teacher in the school, it was not content related. They said, what are you interested in? We had somebody that did fly fishing. We did somebody that did origami. We had somebody who talked about archery. We had somebody who did knitting. And 1 hour a week, the kids went, and it was purely to say, you have an interest in something, it's not school related, go. And it wasn't academic based, it wasn't skills based, it was, we are going to expand your interest, we're going to expand your knowledge. And it went really well.
I love that. Okay. Yeah, I love that. And that would just be beneficial to another piece that we could tell parents about that we are offering.
We had a yoga class, parents sign off, gave him permission. And there was one teacher that did an hour of yoga. She was a certified yoga instructor and she did yoga and it was great.
Wow, yeah. I do like that. I do. I'll have to run that by our people here and see if I could get any bites on it.
Well, and it was great too, because it was cross grade level. So I did battle of the books with our librarian. And so we had kids who just loved reading 6 and 8 mixed. And again, they talk about that as a benefit for our gifted kids. Now, for our 8th grade gifted kids, it wasn't as much, but our 6th grade gifted kids who were socially more mature or intellectually more mature, suddenly they were reading the same books and having a time to talk with 8th graders. And it was a little easier to find like-mindedness. It was really cool. It was really cool.
That sounds great. That really does.
I know.
Okay, well, do you have anything else?
No, I think that's all.
Okay,